This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com.
Let's talk about Benoit for a minute here. He's one of the more respected wrestlers in the wrestling business at this moment. And a week prior to this, when he was doing a bit with Les Thatcher, he was given a private locker room as the stars get on Thatcher's casino shows. But Benoit refused to take it, saying, I'd rather. That's something that has become a bit legendary. A couple of weeks ago, Peacock played a whole documentary about The Miz, and there's a lot of rumor and innuendo about Benoit and locker room etiquette. What do you remember about Benoit and his strong feelings about what should or shouldn't happen in a locker room?
Well, he just felt that he didn't want any special treatment. He wanted to be treated just like the boys. He thought all the boys should be dressing in the same locker room. He wasn't political by any means. He would never politic his way to the top. He always did it the right way. And Chris was an upstanding individual. That's how he felt, and that's how he felt about it, the boys. He felt that nobody should have special treatment. And there are some wrestlers that will take the private room. And why wouldn't you? I mean, if they offer it, you might as well take it. But Chris was very strong on his feet, separated from the boys.
Let's talk about how this whole thing really gets kicked off. Raw on April 30th does a 4.98 rating, and you open with an interview and get a bunch of great heat, according to Dave Meltzer. He would write, Benoit came out and the two got into a brawl, which had more action in 1 minute than in the rest of the show combined. The upshot of all this was Benoit left with Angle's medals. Angle, in far too comic a bit, spent the rest of the show looking for Benoit, who had already left. So, this is a staple of Vince McMahon / Bruce Pritchard booking. Somebody's going to steal somebody else's stuff. And boy, we've got something actually worth stealing here. Olympic gold medals. What'd you think of this creative?
I thought it was brilliant because it was so comical. And, at one point it's disrespectful to steal someone's gold medals, but, Chris needed more character. He needed, he needed to have, just more personality, and
more entertainment.
Yes. And I think this was really helping him because they were really trying to push Chris at this particular time very hard. As a matter of fact, they made him look almost invincible in all his matches. So I think they were working on his personality and character, showing the fans he can be entertaining. So that's why we did that.
The following SmackDown, you're wrestling Bob Holly, and believe it or not, Bob Holly steals a win with a schoolboy. Of course, Chris Benoit came to ringside wearing your medals, and that distracted you. And ta-da! Is this your way of saying, "Hey, sorry about that whole arm thing"?
I don't think so. I'm glad that Bob won the match, but I think they were really trying to push Bob. Bob was a really great talent. He had a lot to offer to the business. They utilized him to push guys to the main event. He was kind of like the pre-main event wrestler that would get guys, give them the push to the main event level. And I think they were trying to push Bob into the main event level. He was very talented. I don't think it had anything to do with me injuring him. I think it had a lot to do with they wanted to push him.
The following Raw is May 7th, and this is where we see Meltzer become very critical of your creative. He would say, you're still playing the geek role that should have been dropped roughly a year ago. You're going to tell Edge and Christian to grab Benoit if they see him and get the medals. And Meltzer would say, these guys, Edge and Christian, are like the only cool characters left in the company at this point. And it's only because they're sick of hearing you complain. He's very critical, he being Meltzer, of the way creative had been booking you, specifically the character of Kurt Angle. He wanted you to have more serious booking. He felt like maybe they were leading into the comedy, nerdy stuff too much. And I want to take just a time out and ask you about that, because I do feel like sometimes if you play a character so well outside of wrestling in mainstream entertainment, you get, I believe the phrase is typecast. So to this day, I can't see an old television show or movie with James Gandolfini and not think of him as Tony Soprano. He'll always be Tony Soprano to me, even though he did a bunch of characters before and I suppose a few after. But did you feel like here, hey man, they're sort of pigeonholing me with this comedy nerdy stuff, and it almost works to your detriment when you're so good at it, they really can't think of doing anything else with you as a result. Do you think that's a catch-22 of all this?
Well, yes, but I love doing the comedy stuff. I would have done it my whole entire career. If it was my choice, I would have stuck with it. But Vince McMahon decided he wanted me to be taken more seriously due to I was an Olympic gold medalist and I was a real life badass. So he decided that my hair versus hair match with Edge, that would be the transition, even though I wore a wig for a couple weeks after that and still did some of the comedy stuff. But that was the end of it. That was the very end of my comedy acts for the WWE. And when Ed shaved my head and that transition, I went from Kurt Angle, the dork, the comedy guy, to Kurt Angle, the wrestling machine. And that's where Vince wanted me, the direction he wanted me to head.
Well, they're so focused on the story that the wrestling is just sort of in the background. You're going to have a match here with Bradshaw, and all of a sudden on the big screen, you see a live shot of Chris Benoit at the WWF New York restaurant. So Bradshaw clotheslines you, and then you just leave. There's no bell that rings. There's no official announcement as a winner. They just play Bradshaw's music, and you're sprinting to get a car to go to the WWF New York. And Meltzer would say, Angle was at WWF New York for a segment that turned out to be ill-advised. Everyone, whether face or heel, is cheered like crazy at WWF New York. Benoit, when he does interviews, gets mixed reactions because nobody knows exactly what to make of his interviews. I'm convinced at this point that Benoit has to be a heel because he is just so much more effective as this guy who gave the great faces matches on TV. Sooner or later, the people will turn him because he's good. But telling people he's good without a super strong angle, which they haven't had, and with his interviews not really being up to par and he's being exposed in that regard, it's causing him to go into quicksand. Anyway, the crowd cheered Angle like crazy at WWF New York, and Benoit got no reaction at Nassau. Benoit put the medals down his pants again. So we'll talk about the medals down the pants in a moment. But this actually makes sense to me, you know, on some level, outside of the context of storyline, if you will. If a bunch of wrestling fans are just hanging out at a Hooters or something, and a bad guy walks in and they're all there watching wrestling together, they're going to be excited because, hey, we've just seen a star. And fans, even though you are playing a bad guy here, they really like the job you're doing. So of course they're going to cheer, right?
Oh, without a doubt. I was very entertaining. And, you know, it's New York City. And if you're a WWE superstar, they're going to cheer you loudly. I think that Chris, you know, I think that him coming from WCW, which is a completely different territory, if you want to call it a territory, because we don't have territories much anymore. But, you know, they felt that he was an outsider. And also, you're right about his interviews. He was just really bland and didn't have much character or personality to him. So I think that's why it was very difficult for the fans to make him a babyface. He's an incredible wrestler, and you're right, that would eventually get him over as a babyface. But you need to have a strong character to really care for you.
You know, listen, I'm silly for asking this, I'm sure, but these medals that Benoit's putting down his pants, these are no longer the actual gold medals, right? These are
No, they're gold medals that I won when I was a little kid, midget wrestling. I wore those. I grabbed them out of my metal box and just grabbed a couple of them and decided to use them. And they're from when I was 8 or 9 years old.
That's tremendous.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the build here. We're finally going to get the announcement of our wrestling match on May 17th on SmackDown. That night on the show, it's you and Regal teaming up against Benoit and before the match, you're bragging about winning all the gold medals that you won back in 1996. Meanwhile, these fans in Louisville have never won anything, but you're going to get your gold medals back on Sunday. And you also announced the stipulations for your 2 out of 3 falls match. And your announcement is that you're going to have a wrestling match. And Benoit says your idea sucks, challenges you to be creative. So you agree to a submission match for the second fall. And the third fall will be a ladder match.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at savewithconrad.com.